If no hostage deal is reached soon, Israel will intensify and expand combat operations in the Gaza Strip, which is hard to imagine when you see how portions of Gaza look today, like this right here, Beit Hanun. There's just not much left. Nonetheless, that's the direction the IDF says they're headed in. On top of that, we got a wild study we're going to talk through today titled How American and European Media Became an Uncritical Mouthpiece for a Designated Foreign Terror Organization. So that's not ideal, and we've got the study and some examples pulled off of X here in the recent weeks. Now, starting with the expansion or possible expansion of IDF operations in Gaza, the Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Zamir, put out a statement a couple days ago where he said, quote, "If there is a deal to release the hostages, it will be made possible first and foremost thanks to your combat." This was in a speech he was giving to Israeli soldiers. "If an agreement is reached, we will pause and reposition along lines defined by the political echelon. If no deal is reached, my directive to Southern Command is to intensify and expand combat operations as much as possible. We will ensure Gaza no longer poses a threat to the state of Israel for generations to come. Sadly, this war comes with a heavy cost. 2 days ago, we lost 3 soldiers from the 401st Brigade. It is a painful and heavy price we have to pay in order to defend ourselves. We continue to strike and eliminate Hamas terrorists. In recent weeks alone, we have struck over 1,300 terrorists, some of them who were Nukba Force terrorists from October 7th, as in some of the Hamas members that entered Israel on October 7th. Notably, the IDF has listed out 3 or 4 just in the last couple days here that they've eliminated. Just earlier today, the IDF announced that they had killed Ilyad Nasser, who served as the deputy commander of the Hamas Jabaliyah battalion. They say he did invade Israel on October 7th, was injured during the war, and eventually returned to his role as the commander, as deputy commander of the battalion. That same strike also killed 2 others who participated in the October 7th attacks. Hassan Mahmoud, the commander of the Central Jabaliyah Company, and Mohammed Zaki, the deputy commander of a company in Hamas's Beit Hanun battalion. Again, Beit Hanun really getting hammered hard by Israel right now. Additionally, we just got notification that the commander of Hamas's Daraj Tufa battalion, who also took part in the operation, the raid, the invasion into Israel on October 7th, was killed in an IDF airstrike in the last couple days. They add that, or the guy here, Mohammed Uthayin, apologies in the pronunciation there, was killed last week in the area of Gaza City's eastern Daraj and Tufa neighborhood. They say that he led part of the onslaught on October 7th, and since the war began and moved back into the Gaza Strip, he's been involved in numerous attacks against IDF forces. Now, as Israel is not just going after some of these high-value targets or who have kind of moved up the ranks to become high-value targets, remember, a lot of the senior Hamas leadership has long since been eliminated in the Gaza Strip. So what you're seeing is a lot of these organizations is kind of the next man up. And in some cases, the person who was in charge back on October 7th is just now being located and eliminated. In most other cases, they're moving up. They're having to go down the bench quite a bit to find people to fill these roles. Now, additionally, or in addition to the high-value targets that were hit, Israel said hundreds of targets were engaged by Israeli Air Force fighter jets, helicopters, and drones during ongoing operations this past week that included cells of operatives, weapons caches, booby traps, anti-tank and sniper posts, as well as quite a few additional underground tunnel networks that were located and destroyed. Now, turning to Hamas, we got a pretty lengthy statement from their spokesperson, Abu Abaida, earlier this week, and there were a couple key components here that I wanted to run through. First off, he said, quote, "We countered the Zionist military operation, Gideon's Chariots, with the Stones of David operation." So you're going to see and have seen that terminology used in the last couple weeks. The IDF operation right now in the Gaza Strip, Gideon's Chariots. Hamas is referring to their operation as Stones of David. He says, "Over the past 4 months, we have killed and wounded hundreds of enemy soldiers. That number seems a little bit high. As somebody trying to keep track of this, no doubt casualties have increased since the IDF went back into the Gaza Strip a couple months ago. Hundreds seems like it might be on the high side unless we're including everyone with even minor injuries that are released shortly after a test for, say, traumatic brain injury or something like that." He says, in recent weeks, our fighters have attempted to capture several Zionist soldiers, and we have seen an uptick in that. 2 or 3 cases just in the last couple of weeks where clearly Hamas is trying to actually get a hold of an Israeli soldier that's alive and bring them back into captivity. At this point, they've not been successful. He says the strategy of the Qassam or Hamas leadership at this stage is to inflict a massacre with the enemy, carrying out special operations and seeking to capture their soldiers. We have repeatedly offered in recent months a comprehensive deal in which we would release all of the enemy's prisoners at once, but the war criminal Netanyahu and his ministers rejected this offer. We are monitoring the ongoing negotiations and hope that they will result in a deal that guarantees the cessation of the war of extermination, the withdrawal of the Israeli enemy, and relief for our people in Gaza. Now, my understanding at this point, the Hamas stance on negotiations is largely unchanged from where it's been throughout the duration of this war, which is why many in the Israeli military and political leadership feel that they're on the right path. It's taking a long time, no doubt. It's very costly, no doubt. But if they continue to pressure Hamas, they may actually get to a point where Hamas just buckles. The stance that Hamas is taking today is not only does Israel have to release all of the prisoners that they hold, Palestinian prisoners that they hold in Israel, they also have to leave the Gaza Strip entirely, and Hamas will remain in power in Gaza. There's a couple non-starters there for Netanyahu and other senior officials in Israel. I mean, if you think about it, if Israel were to just walk away today, leave Hamas in charge, release a bunch of prisoners back to Gaza, and have the IDF step out of the Gaza Strip entirely, it's essentially accepting defeat. So I don't think that's going to happen in the near future. Now, on that note, we did get a couple clips here I wanted to share with you all from Hamas and one from Palestinian Islamic Jihad. That's the one we're going to start with. Just came out earlier today showing their operations in Shujaiya. So I've got that playing here. This is an IED attack against, I believe this was carried out 2 or 3 days ago. So you see that looks like the initiator, if you will. So this, we've got the IED in the bag. They're going to dig a hole, place that in a road with an engineering vehicle, is what I believe was the Israeli vehicle that drove over this. And then it looks like some sort of, like a pressure plate almost, that long. Can you imagine digging out in the open like this right now in Gaza? That number of aircraft overhead probably watching for this exact type of activity. Nonetheless, Hamas says that this is the footage of the attack. We don't have anything clear or more close up of this. My understanding is that the IDF did announce just a couple days ago that 2, maybe 3 soldiers within an engineering unit were attacked by an IED in Gaza and sustained minor injuries. I didn't see anything from Palestinian Islamic Jihad in terms of the success of this operation. They just said, hey, we targeted these guys. Here's the footage. Now, Hamas also put out a clip just earlier today where they said they were targeting IDF forces in Jabalia. And this one's a little bit different because we see an actual kind of close-range attack against Israeli armored vehicles, tanks, to be specific in this case. We're definitely seeing less Hamas footage as of late, but the footage that's coming out is much more, at the beginning of the war, it was constant, 2, 3, 4, 5 clips a day sometimes. But a lot of that was mortars, drones being launched, one-way attack drones, not really the loitering type drones, and a lot of IEDs being placed, and then the occasional small arms fire. What we're seeing now is less footage, but a lot more of this right here, where it's very close range against IDF forces. And just a week or 2 ago, we walked through some clips where some Hamas fighters ran right up to the hood of an Israeli vehicle where the soldiers had gathered inside and threw explosive charges down the hatch. We saw another clip very similar to that just a couple days later where an explosive charge was placed on the backside of a tank, and you're going to see something very similar in this clip here as well. So my guess is they probably were able to get this close based off of some tunnels. Again, we know the IDF, they've got the overhead view of these guys running up to the tank. That's wild. Looks like an RPG maybe fired against that bottom tank as a bit of a distraction. You don't usually see multiple angles of the Hamas attacks, but it does look like that's what they were able to pull off here. So an RPG is a bit of a distraction. You see the dust kicking up. And then it shifts back to a different angle. I think we had the overhead view here again in a moment where a shape charge type IED or mine was placed on the tank and detonated. So this is an explosively formed projectile, EFP, there you go, running up to the tank on the top, placing the charge, running away. We are seeing a lot more of that in recent weeks. And there's a couple different takeaways. One is you could say that Hamas is becoming desperate, because that is a suicide mission. For every one of these that we see that Hamas releases the footage, you have to assume there is a larger number where they don't actually make it to the tank or back from the tank after setting that explosive charge. In broad daylight, running across open terrain, trying to set a charge and getting out of there with your life is a long shot at best. So one argument could be that Hamas is getting desperate and more willing to sacrifice the few fighters they have remaining to get effective shots and strikes against some of these Israeli vehicles. And I should note, in this particular clip, it's not clear the damage sustained. We didn't see any after. You saw everything that's been released. There was a bright flash. Clearly some things went boom. Did it actually penetrate the tank's armor? Did it cause any casualties inside is unknown. And then, of course, another way to look at this, these close-range attacks, is kind of in line with what Abu Ubaida mentioned a few days ago, where he said part of their goal here is not just to inflict a massacre, kill or wound a lot of Israeli soldiers, but also to try to capture some of them alive. So it very well might be the case that time and time again, they're doing everything they can to get as close as possible. And depending on the target, once they pop out of their tunnels, they determine, hey, this time we're going to be carrying out an IED attack. We're going to be throwing an IED down the hatch. Or like we saw about a week ago, where they actually assaulted, kind of an infantry assault against one of these engineering vehicles and tried to capture the driver that was killed in that engagement. All right, and then moving over to this pretty wild study that was just put together, and we do have some examples we're going to run through in a moment, but it's titled The Fourth Estate Sale, How American and European Media Became an Uncritical Mouthpiece for a Designated Foreign Terror Organization. Hamas, in this case. This is not good for, I think we got the Washington Post, CNN, and Reuters get called out specifically here. Now, this was put together by the Network Contagion Research Institute and Rutgers University Social Perception Lab. So Rutgers University, an institution here in the United States. NCRI, doing a little research here, is an American organization dedicated to identifying and predicting the spread of ideologically motivated threats, disinformation, and misinformation across social media platforms and physical spaces. So this seems like right up their alley. And that's what they were looking at. I will link this whole report in the description below if you want to check it out. It's like 30 pages, so it's not really all that long. And that includes like the cover sheet and all the graphs and pictures and index. But their summary, kind of the bottom line up front here, they say NCRI assesses that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was not merely the subject of criticism, but the target of a convergent narrative attack in which American and European media acted as a de facto mouthpiece for a foreign terrorist organization. This environment systematically elevated Hamas-linked claims, which were often unverified, uncontextualized, or outright false. Major headlines were repeatedly exaggerated or framed to imply atrocity, often without source transparency or sufficient evidentiary scrutiny. And a couple of the key components they got into here, they said mainstream media spread hostile, often unverified narratives, delegitimizing the U.S.-backed humanitarian aid efforts in Gaza. That's the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. We've talked about them a couple times in recent videos. At this point, they've handed out like 80, maybe 90 million meals in Gaza, but they called out here, they said narrative backlash closely tracked U.S. operational success on the ground. The analysis showed that successful Gaza Humanitarian Foundation deliveries were predictive of subsequent spikes in largely negative conversation about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Aid activity consistently triggered outrage online, suggesting that humanitarian performance itself is treated as a narrative provocation. That's wild. So they saw, as the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation handed out more meals, as they saw more success on the ground, the pushback and the negative stories spread about them increased directly. That's something. They say unverified media headlines triggered viral conspiratorial social media posts, often amplified by foreign state media. I feel like I saw that in a lot of comment sections. There were a couple things we're going to get to here in a minute that before the retraction even came out, sometimes after the retraction came out, these stories still spread as fact and probably still are today. So getting into a couple of the examples they call out, and these are just a few that I thought were worth running through. First off, they say the Washington Post retracted early versions of a report that explicitly stated Israeli troops killed over 30 Palestinians near a U.S. aid site in Gaza. The original headline attributed to, quote, health officials the claims about Israeli troops being responsible for the deaths, but the journalists failed to clarify that this attribution solely reflected a claim from the Gaza Health Ministry. The Washington Post retracted the headline stating that Israeli troops killed over 30 people near the aid site, updated the article to reflect that responsibility for the incident remained contested, and released a statement on X that should not have been published, saying it should not have been published in that form. And that's a big theme that we're seeing throughout this study is there's a lot of reporting, it seems, that goes quickly without waiting for attribution, or just one side says something, so like, good enough, send it. And it seems like time and time again, the one side saying something was the Gaza Health Ministry. A lot of acronyms here. So Gaza Health Ministry is the organization inside of Gaza that historically has had a lot of oversight, I think is the way to put it, by Hamas. So there's always been a lot of skepticism as to the veracity of their claims and if they have other motives at times. The second one here, they say CNN corrected its report of a shooting near the Gaza aid site in which at least 31 Palestinians were allegedly killed. The original article uncritically reported the Gaza Health Ministry's claim that the Israeli military was responsible, without making clear that this accusation had not been independently verified. Further, the report was published without obtaining a statement from the Israeli military, which seems wild. If you're going to say that one group killed all of these people and they have a press office and a website and phone numbers and emails, it seems like you probably should hit that up, right? And you can even say we couldn't reach them or they refused to comment, but not reaching out at all in something this contested is a bit of a miss. And then another one here from Reuters. They say Reuters retracted a central claim in its original reporting that a controversial proposal detailing plans to construct camps in and around Gaza originated from a U.S.-backed aid organization. This attribution was presented without sufficient evidence. Reuters acknowledged that the document could not be definitively linked to the U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in terms of authorship or submission. This is a significant reversal as initial reporting publicized direct organizational involvement in a politically explosive plan that was described as concentration camps. Again, media gets stuff wrong. I get plenty of stuff wrong, right? That's just the nature of the beast, especially in a situation like this where the fog of war is dense. It takes a little bit of time to figure out exactly what happened and what the conflicting stories are, but the pushback that I'm seeing primarily throughout this report put together by NCRI is time and time again when it came to any information around the aid deliveries by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, they ran with the first most salacious claim that Israel was just assassinating, murdering anybody that came near these aid sites, in many cases without even asking Israel, what did you see, what happened? And there were also quite a few accounts in here where they didn't talk to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the people that are on the ground that were involved in this. So they're just getting one account saying, good enough, that's some headlines, that's going to get some clicks, and they're going with it, which, as you can imagine, definitely spurred some pretty conspiratorial takes online. But again, if interested, that full report will be linked in the description below. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.